Hello and welcome to Just Onside. I'm your host for today's episode, Uwais Ahmed, and I am joined by the man who, with a view to raising money for charity, has decided that he will shave the next time Leeds win a Premier League game. So I shall just pencil that in August 2024. How are you, Yub?
I'm not too bad, Lewis. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thank you. It's been a while. We've not recorded for a short while, really just allowing some of these Champions League games to take place and give our thoughts on those. But no, I'm doing well, thank you very much. We would normally be joined by Badge, our resident host. He's not with us for this episode, but hopefully he should be back for the next one. Just before we start diving into the midweek action at Ayub and the weekend action, just another reminder, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, give the episode a like, please share with friends and family, and yeah, share some feedback, put a comment down below as to what your thoughts are on what's being discussed. Ayub, let's dive straight in. We will circle back to the weekend's action, the Premier League action. You may not want to, but I think we have to. But yeah, let's start with the midweek action. We had the Champions League semi-finals first leg. Let's take them in chronological order. We had on Tuesday the Man City against Real Madrid game at the Bernabeu. Now, a very intriguing and interesting game. What were your thoughts, Ayub, watching the game, and how do you think the game is now poised at the half-time mark?
I presume you're talking the Man City game.
The Man City
Man
Real
City.
Madrid game, yeah.
Firstly, a fantastic game of football. It really was. It was a privilege and a pleasure to watch the game. It was two teams at the very top of their game. Fantastic football. Every player on their A game, really enjoyable. Two quality goals, quality performances all around. A thoroughly enjoyable game. As to, I suppose, who the favourites are, it's hard to call. I've got a feeling that it's going to go maybe down to penalties. I just can't see they're so closely matched. Now, I suppose in theory, you'd probably say a 1-1 result for Man City. Probably, I won't quite say job done, but certainly they'd be sort of thinking that we've done the hard work. But I just sort of feel that Real are such a fabulous side, fantastic side, that even at the Etihad, it's not a gimme for Man City. Certainly, it will be a tough game. I think both sides will probably think that they can edge it. I've just got a feeling it's going to be quite tight. A bit similar to this, even though there were opportunities. I think this one may be even a little bit more tighter because, in a sense, there is no coming back. So I would say it's going to be a tight one. I've got a feeling that City will just sneak it. I've got a feeling it will be certainly going into extra time. I just can't see a result in normal time, but I'm looking forward to it. My mouth is watering. I think it's a game for the ages. So I'm certainly looking forward to it.
It's funny, you don't sound half as bullish as you did on previous episodes about how Man City will win this Champions League, but and I think that's why you had to draw the conclusion that you did, that they will sneak through. But I agree with your sentiment overall. I mean, the game was it was very intriguing in a lot of ways. You've got two teams that, to your point, played at the absolute peak of their powers. This was football. This was quality football. It really was a case. I thought both teams produced the type of form or the type of class, let's say, that we know that they can both provide. And it's one of those games that actually it felt a little bit like the Brighton Manchester United semi-final FA Cup. The only slight difference I thought was, and what I mean by that is, it was a tight game, but yet both teams had times during the game when they were not dominant, but fairly well in control.
Yeah.
So it wasn't your typical just quite a nervy affair. It was just another. Both teams had their kind of moments where they were, I wouldn't say dominant, but definitely more superior and having more control. So yeah, I think a really interesting game. I thought Manchester City started really well, plenty of good control, knocking it around, finding spots. Didn't create too much. A few shots. You had the shot from just outside the box, I think, from De Bruyne, a fairly routine save for Courtois. You had the Rodri save from distance, Rodri shot from distance, I should say. Courtois with a good strong hand just to turn it around. But I thought Manchester City were slightly in the ascendancy before Real Madrid got the goal, and it's very typical Real Madrid. Lovely 1-2, Camavinga, Modric. Camavinga attacks the space, plays it into Vinicius Junior, and an unbelievable finish from a player who I know we spoke about Haaland for potential Ballon d'Or and kind of player of the year, so to speak. But I think Vinicius Junior is definitely up there in that conversation based on perhaps his form over the last couple of years. But an unbelievable strike. City obviously got into halftime, and after halftime against Real Madrid were kind of again a little bit in the ascendancy, and you felt they were not necessarily threatening a second, but you felt they were the team that was going to score next, even though Man City had one or two opportunities. The Kevin De Bruyne one springs to mind, a fantastic save from Courtois with a strong hand. It was given offside, but I think if it went in, it would have required a few lines to be drawn, let's say. And I think it was very close, very tight, but incredible save. And I think there afterwards, obviously, Man City get the goal, and I think this is what you're alluding to. You've got two elite teams, and it's a game punctuated by moments from unbelievable players, top class footballers, and Kevin De Bruyne puts his imprint on the game as big players do in big moments. Lovely finish, uses the defender as a bit of a kind of a guide to kind of just outside of his foot, just absolutely drill it in. Courtois having no chance. Just want to get your thoughts on that goal. There was a little bit of talk after the game, and if you remember, just straight after the goal, I think Ancelotti and the kind of staff were booked, and there was obviously talk that the ball had gone out. I've got some slightly strong thoughts on this, but I just wanted to kind of hear if you kind of delved into that a little bit on what your thoughts were.
It's one of those things where you always look at the incident and then how long did it take before the goal went in. So I think there was sufficient time. Ancelotti certainly was irate at the start. You could sort of see him on the touchline. He wasn't happy. But then he did calm down. I'm not exactly sure in terms of the time scale, but there was sufficient time for Real Madrid to be in position. So yes, I mean, I think from what I've certainly seen and what I've heard, it did cross the line. So therefore, I suppose, I mean, if you're being really sort of critical, you could probably turn around and say that the decision was incorrect. It should have been stopped. But from in terms of advantage, I really don't think it was something that gave unfair advantage. And I think Real Madrid had every opportunity to try and sort of make sure that we're in position. So for me, it's not a major issue. Yes, you can turn around, but in terms of mistakes, it wasn't a critical mistake, that one. Because there was ample time. So certainly from my point of view, no major issues. And if it was against my side, I'd be upset. But really, I'd be expecting my side to have enough time to obviously, I suppose, counter the offensive play by Man City.
Yeah, and I share the very same sentiment, Ayub. Absolutely, if anything, even stronger. I mean, when you watch the goal there afterwards, Real Madrid actually secure control of the ball thereafter. So there's a clearance. It falls to Camavinga, and he makes the cardinal sin of going sideways into a middle area, playing Rodrigo a little bit short. And it's there afterwards where the ball gets pinched, and then it's obviously a couple of passes later, Gundogan into De Bruyne, and the rest is history. So from my perspective, it was an absolute non-story. And I was a little surprised to hear even Arsene Wenger talking about how, well, the ball across the line and VAR should really be going back and checking, because the fact of the matter is, whether it crossed the line or it didn't, and there was talk about there's a chip in the ball and all the rest of it, the fact is, it's, to your point, incidental given the time that had lapsed. And the fact is, your team had secured not just half control of possession, they actually secured full possession. It was Camavinga who then plays Rodrigo, I believe, into trouble. So it was an absolute non-story for me, clutching at straws. But okay, fine. In the emotion of the game, I understand, and I think that we can all forgive. But yeah, on the whole, I think Real Madrid then thereafterwards had some opportunities, perhaps in the last 10 minutes, in terms of a few half situations. Obviously, even at 1-0, you had that lovely move when Benzema, the shot was blocked, it went over. But that's the kind of stuff that Real Madrid can put together. And you mentioned how I think if I hear you correctly, you're a little bit more conservative, let's say, about Man City's hopes, perhaps based on what you saw from Real Madrid. And that's kind of what I took from it. I mean, last year, last year at the Etihad, if you remember, the unbelievable 4-3 game, Real obviously went back and turned it around in the most incredible circumstances. I mean, that's freakish in a way in terms of how they turned it around at the Bernabeu when the game was all done. It was
Yeah.
absolutely done. It's funny having watched them closely, and I know every game's different, but I feel slightly more confident in Real Madrid in the sense that I couldn't tell you who's going to win right now. I spoke to a few people after the game who feel Man City will see this through, and listen, they may well do, and they are favourites. But if anything, I actually felt as though I couldn't necessarily be convinced that that would be the case. And I think Real Madrid, you heard Courtois talk about it, that they're going to be treating it like a final, and they do well in those. I think
Mm.
something along those lines. But if anything, I do feel that Real Madrid, if they can stay in the game and slowly make their way, I mean, I would. I just wouldn't be surprised. I would not be surprised if they managed to overcome City simply based on watching them quite closely in that game. And yes, they had their difficulties in the game, but there were also large periods of that game where, and you may say City simply conceded possession or conceded territory, but Real Madrid were also knocking it around with some real class. So I just feel very non-committal about this second leg because it's a real tough one to call.
It is. You're absolutely right. I mean, it's very rare, if ever, you see City uh, losing the ball, feeling under pressure, and panicking. There were almost moments in the game that they looked hurried, they looked rushed. It was misplaced passes, not for the whole game, because I think they were the first 30 minutes. Certainly, I think City were in the ascendancy. I wouldn't sort of say they were dominating, but certainly they were in the ascendancy. Real sort of clawed it back, and it was against the run of play their goal. In the second half, I thought Real Madrid had a period of time they were in complete control, and it looked. I mean, as I said, it's very rare that you see Man City panicking, and there's just moments, small moments, but it just looked they were hurried. They just looked under pressure, which perhaps, obviously, considering it's Man City, they're very rarely under pressure. So it's a new experience. So I was incredibly impressed by Real, but I was equally impressed by Man City as well. Let's not forget that it was at the Bernabeu. And it's 1-1, so it's a fantastic result. But it was just wonderful as a spectacle. It was wonderful. I mean, individual performances. I mean, for me, I pick Rodri as my standout. He was absolutely magnificent. I mean, I think obviously there are much more flair players, attacking players who perhaps sort of stole the show. But just in terms of a complete performance, almost complete performance, there was a couple of things that Rodri did that maybe a sort of late challenge, maybe just one or two passes that perhaps didn't reach the target. But in terms of a performance, and he said it was really interesting. It post match about concentration. It's a sort of game that you cannot, for a fraction of a second, switch off. And that's really why I enjoyed it so much. That this is football at the highest level. This is, and it's sometimes it's rare that you see that there's two teams at the zenith, at the pinnacle of their powers. And it really is. It's a match where you cannot for even half a second take your eye off the ball. You've got to be on your game, and it was wonderful. I mean, I must confess, it's probably one of the best games that I've seen, purely from a pure point of view. That it was wonderful to watch. So after the performance, I'm just sort of thinking maybe it's not quite a foregone conclusion. I'm still thinking. I mean, but the reality will be, certainly from my point of view, whoever wins this tie wins the cup. I don't know
Yeah,
what your thoughts are.
no, I mean, listen, there'll be strong favourites, and we'll come on to the game on Wednesday shortly. Just to finish off on this for this game at the Bernabeu. Yeah, to your point, this was a game played between two high quality teams, high functioning teams. You can't carry any passengers in games like these. And to your point about what Rodri mentioned, that's what it is. It forces you under so much pressure in terms of the mental side of things that you know that if you make certain decisions or you're caught out of position or you try a pass that you shouldn't do, both teams have the absolute quality to make you pay for those small mistakes. But look, we're at the halfway stage. Special mention, I guess, goes to Alaba and Rudiger, two elite defenders. They did a great job on Haaland. They got physical with him, but a great striker that he is, he'll obviously want to have his opportunity to shine in the second leg. So yeah, finally poised. Difficult to say what's going to happen with the second leg. I think it's played on Wednesday, so it should make for a magnificent a game, and we'll see who prevails and makes their way to the final. Let's move on to the Wednesday game. We had obviously AC Milan against Inter Milan. The game, even though they play at the San Siro and have shared that stadium for the best part of 70 plus years, it was AC Milan at home. I'll give my thoughts on this game first. I think both teams probably surprised to be here at this stage. I mean, not many would have picked either of the teams to be representing the Champions League or within in the Champions League or representing at this stage. And obviously, one's going to make the final. I thought for AC Milan, they obviously missed Badge's main man, Rafael Leao. I mean, there's been a lot made of his absence, but he's a big miss. And when you're playing big games at the absolute crucial stage of the season, you want your best 11 out. I think that's the only thing you ask for as a manager, as a supporter of that team. You're thinking, look, we may not get to a Champions League semi-final for a long, long time. It's not guaranteed. And when you get there and when you've got an opportunity, and you're playing against a team that you'd still fancy to come through, you're not playing against one of the absolute powerhouses of European football. I mean, Inter have been that in previously, but not, I mean, they would have surprised themselves, right, being at this stage. So I think you want your best players available, and to have Rafael Leao out, to lose, I think, Benacer at the 18th minute. I mean, they were up against it. But I mean, Inter Milan, got to give them huge credit. They seemed ready. They seemed a team in sync. They felt comfortable about how they were going to kind of impact AC Milan and force them into situations that they simply didn't want to be. You always get that feel when you see gaps appearing everywhere. As for the first goal, corner, Edin Dzeko, he's got a really good record. I mean, his 6 seasons at Roma after he left Manchester City, he's got a goal every 2 games. Slightly less prolific at Inter Milan, but I think there he's obviously been kind of in and out of the team and rotated with other strikers. But he's a striker that's done really well since he left Manchester City and has been one of the kind of premier strikers in Italian football. But what a lovely finish. I mean, under pressure, you've got the defender all over you. He's kind of being aggressive. All that you want from your striker, he sees it all the way. And a lovely hook finish. Keeper's obviously got absolutely no chance. And when you're early doors, an early goal, I mean, that settles everyone down. And then they just go from strength to strength. Cutting through AC Milan at will in terms of the gaps that were there. You'd think AC Milan might just think, listen, let's just kind of stop the flow here and just kind of get 2 banks of 4 for a little while and just make our way into this game. And I think that's the thing about Rafael Leao. A lot of people were kind of talking about it as, well, they miss Leao, but what about the defending? And I always think, well, the striker helps you defend because he's giving you an outlet, and the other team can't quite be as, let's say, bullish in terms of being quite aggressive with their positions, knowing you've got a Rafael Leao who could run kind of half the length of the pitch. So it does impact your whole defending. It affects your whole team shape. But the second goal, I mean, it's the kind of goal. I mean, you one side pass, Mkhitaryan collects it beautifully, and he's going to score from there 10 times out of 10. And yeah, you could argue there that the game's done and dusted. Inter had so many opportunities. They hit the post there afterwards from the long-range strike from Çalhanoğlu. Barella had an opportunity. I mean, it really was. It could have been any. It could have been plenty in the first half. We then got quite a controversial moment with the penalty incident. You had the Simon Kjær quote-unquote fouling Lautaro Martinez. I just want to get your quick thoughts on this incident first before perhaps I give you mine. What were your thoughts on that penalty? Again, the referee's given the award and then reversed his decision. How did you see that whole kind of decision process play out?
I mean, firstly, I unfortunately wasn't able to watch the match live. I was at a protest march, Imran Khan, so I couldn't watch the match live. But I watched the highlights, and I'm again, I suppose, because there is no real allegiance to any side. I can perhaps be quite, in my mind, dispassionate and perhaps be quite objective about it. I'd like to see decisions where if somebody's, I suppose, going to ground easily to win a penalty, that was, I mean, if there was any contact, that was, I mean, it was a breath. It was a heavy breath. They weren't certainly a challenge. So I was delighted it was overturned, because I think if more and more decisions are go in the favour of, I suppose, the defender, when he's not made a challenge to foul the player, or it should be a challenge which ends up with a trip or a player falling down. So from my point of view, absolutely delighted. I think we need to see that more often. If we see it more often, maybe, I suppose, players will then think, well, I'm not going to get a penalty if I just go to ground, if I just sort of pretend that there's some sort of contact sufficient. But you could just see that was play acting. So delighted that it was overturned. So for me, absolutely, I agree with the decision. I agree that it was great work by the VAR team, because I presume obviously the penalty was given. This is what I'd like to see. I think obviously whoever was in charge of VAR, I think made a good decision, a good footballing decision.
You've hit the nail on the head there, in terms of your last statement. A good footballing decision. Because quite often and I don't want to kind of go off on a tangent here, but quite often the refereeing and the officiating fraternity, let's say, or those kind of in charge of establishing and also then putting those rules into place, let's say in-game rules, they tie themselves in knots with phrases of clear and obvious. Well, what's clear and obvious to you might be different to what's clear and obvious to me. And then they talk about, well, we don't want to re-referee the incident. Now, like yourself, the right decision was reached. And I think regardless of whether, and this is whether you're an AC Milan fan or an Inter Milan fan, again, I would ask you, where is the impediment? Where was the foul? Lautaro Martinez turns, I think Tomori, he's obviously got on the wrong side of Kerr in the first place from the throw-in, where Kerr has obviously miscontrolled the ball. But as he turns in, Simon Kerr, he makes kind of a touch on the back of his kind of on his back with his hand, and then there's a second touch with his hand to the side of him. So he didn't quite grab him. He didn't even put him off balance. And Martinez has definitely simply just flung himself on the floor. The worry I have is that the referees, they got to the right decision, but they got to the right decision by re-refereeing that incident. And you can slice it and dice it any which way, but that's exactly what happened, because there was only one man who had a fantastic view of that incident, and that was the referee. He was 8 yards away with an unimpeded view, and he gave the penalty, which is why, to your point, VAR made, I think, what I would say, and this is what I want to see in most decisions, where it's not a case of, hey, the bar's been set, clear and obvious, and if it isn't clear and obvious, I'm not going to ask the referee to overturn or at least view the monitor. What the VAR has done there is to say, well, we think you've made a mistake, go have another look. And the referee has been strong enough, at least at that point, to see the incident again on the monitor and say, well, I've got it wrong. Now, like you, penalties are too important. I would say get them right. Regardless of what decision you've made, get them right. But there's no way the officiating fraternity can tell me that the right protocol was followed in arriving at that decision, because the fact is, A, the referee's seen it better than anyone. And it's not necessarily clear and obvious, because obviously Kerr does put his hand, but for me, there's no foul there. Remember, it's going to be a penalty that's going to be awarded, and it's simply not enough. And I'm surprised Martinez threw himself on the floor, because he'd have had, again, a pretty clear shot on goal with his left foot. But anyway, we digress.
I think just on that point, so what do you think? I think what did obviously use. And you're right. The referee was in an excellent position. He was in the best position. He's obviously seen something at the time. What's changed? When he looked at the screen, what did he see on the screen that he didn't see with his naked eyes?
Well, this is the funny thing. On the Champions League is a lot, what I would say, less. How can I say it? A lot less tolerant, I would say. If you think about the Chelsea penalty that was given against Dortmund, and I always say it should be common sense. What is and what isn't a foul? What is and what isn't an infringement? Most of it is common sense, so you have 95% of the time. And you see penalties given where the guy's crossing it from a yard away, the guy's shooting from a yard away, a couple of yards away, and you're thinking his hand's next to his body. It feels very different to the silhouette rule that's supposed to be in play in the Premier League. So I don't understand it. I think, to your point, what's he seen? I think what he's seen is, A, the VAR officials have been strong enough to send him to the screen. Remember, that's What you're doing there as a VAR official is to say to the referee, we know you are in the best position to make this call. We simply think you've made the wrong one. So they've been strong in that assertion. And then I think when the referee's gone to see, and then we know this, right? 99% of the time when you go to see the screen, we saw this at St. James's Park this Sunday as well. You're gonna overturn the decision, and I think when he's looked at it, and I'm happy with that process in the sense of he's gone to see a slow version, a slow replay to see is there a foul. He's got to look at Tomori. Has he tripped him up? Because Tomori's on the floor. Has he tripped him up with his hand? Has Martinez's feet collided with Simon Kerr? Because I watched the replay multiple times, by the way, to see have their feet made any connection, and it's difficult to tell. But again, if it's difficult to tell, you err on the side of caution. You can't give a penalty for something that might be. You have to give a penalty for something that's clear.
But you say that. I mean, I watched it, albeit it was highlights. So obviously, I didn't watch it in real time. But when I watched the highlights, and I've watched it on a mobile phone, so obviously it's a small devices. But I straight away when I looked at that, it was clearly obvious that the player had dived. It was clearly obvious, and I could sort of see that. And I'm sort of thinking that if you're actually there, only a few meters away, I find that inexcusable. In a sense, that to me is greatly incompetent because he's obviously seen something to give a penalty. Now, obviously, he's been asked to look at the screen. What's it? As I said, my question is, what have you seen on the screen that you didn't see in real time? Because in a sense, in real time, you've got, I mean, that's in 4D, 5D, 6D, you've got every single, I mean, as I said, his position was good enough to have a really clear view. So that's what worries me sometimes, that if I could understand if something's 100 miles an hour, there's something which perhaps it happened so quickly that you're having to make an instant decision. I think there was enough time, the view was clear, so it was disappointing. As I said, the right decision. It was a great footballing decision. I mean, I want referees to make those decisions. I don't want VAR to make those decisions. I want referees to make the decisions. So for me, it was the right decision in the end. But I'm disappointed with the referee, and I think maybe referees need to be challenged. That if you go on.
No, I was just going to say you're absolutely right, Ayub, but I would say it's still the lesser of two evils to get to the right decision at the end. So to your point, he's made a bit of a mockery in terms of how he's gone about it, given it, and then had to go back. I'd still say it's the lesser of two evils because I'm big on making sure it's fair. Sport is fair, and there he's arrived at the end with the right decision. But let's be very clear, that's simply because of the VAR officials being strong to say,
yeah, absolutely,
it wasn't due to the referee.
Yeah.
But look, I mean, we've slightly gone off tangent, but I think it was an important point to discuss that because it was very interesting how the decision was reached. But there afterwards, I think, look, Milan got themselves back into the game a little. They actually ended up with more possession, 57%. But this was, I mean, Inter by that time just were happy to kind of retreat and see the game out. And they had another great opportunity in the second half. Dzeko, again, Bastoni just runs, he just strides out. Nobody just anywhere near him, but he plays into Dzeko, and that would have ended things for sure. But yeah, we had the Tonali chance for AC Milan at the end. Again, if that goes in, then AC Milan can get a real tonic, and who knows, the game's, funnily enough, the game's finally balanced again going into the second leg. But you have to feel Inter will see this through. Well-deserved win. Absolutely no two ways about it. A lot of pundits being quite critical of AC Milan. I wouldn't go that far. I think they are a team that in the end, when you are, let's say, not saying underdogs, but in terms of underdogs to where they are, semi-finals of the Champions League, you need your best players available, and not having Leao is a big miss for them. He gives them speed, pace, trickery, another goal threat, and I think he's somebody who the Inter Milan team would have had to absolutely account for. So yeah, I see it slightly differently. I wouldn't be overly harsh, but yeah, let's see. I think we would both agree probably that Inter should see this one through now.
They should do. I mean, maybe AC Milan might be slightly relieved because certainly from the highlights when I watched it, Inter started like a house on fire. It could have been 3-4 in no time at all. So maybe I suppose AC Milan might just think, well, we could have been out of this game completely. But you're right. If you're missing your big player, especially when perhaps you're not a side littered with world stars or top quality players, it becomes even more, I suppose, critical that you've got your best player. So I think, without sort of saying it's a foregone conclusion, it's going to be really, really difficult. It's going to be a mountain for AC to climb, which I don't think they will climb.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let's see. Both, and who knows if they start well in the second leg. Pressure is a funny thing. Switching gears, Ayub, as we must.
Do we have to? Do we have
Oh,
to?
well, we could end the episode here if you want. No, look, we have to. We have to cover the weekend's events. Um, a first for the Premier League, a televised game at 3 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon. Manchester City against Leeds for Sam Allardyce's debut as Leeds manager. Man City coming away with a 2-1 victory at home to again set themselves up further for another Premier League title triumph for Leeds. How did you see it, Ayub, in terms of the game? Were there elements of the game, were there elements of the performance that enthused you in terms of the challenge for Leeds moving forward? And yeah, how do you see it for Leeds in the remaining three games?
Yeah, certainly the scoreline flatters us to deceive. It certainly wasn't a 2-1 game. The first half we were quite poor. It was, I mean, you knew that obviously Sam had talked to the players about really being sort of working hard, but we just sat too deep. It could have been six. It really could have been six. I mean, if you look at the opportunities, Haaland, I think he loves Leeds. He just doesn't want to score against Leeds, even though he did score in the in the first game. But we were fortunate. I mean, we were fortunate. I mean, the two goals that we conceded uh, were poor because we had enough men behind the ball. You don't leave a player such as Gundogan on his own, just drifting just onto the edge of the box, sliding it in. But this is Man City. They score an average of 3 goals against every team. So therefore, I'm not too downbeat because I did fear the worst. I did fear an absolute drubbing, which would have made our poor goal difference even worse. So it's strange. I mean, the goal that we scored 85 minutes. I mean, it gave a little hope, but I think in all reality, I just didn't think we had the quality to get a result. So I was expecting a defeat, and that's what happened. I was expecting a heavy defeat. It thankfully never happened, but the writing seems to be on the wall because obviously we're going to now talk about the other games, which were the real hammer blows.
Yeah, absolutely. Just before we switch over to those games, I won't cover the game in any great detail because, to your point, you've absolutely summarized it perfectly there. I do want to get your thoughts on one situation though. You had and to your point, Man City deserved to score 6 and 7. They missed the penalty to make it 3-0. With Pep Guardiola quite animated as to Gundogan taking that penalty and Haaland volunteering that for Gundogan, so he wasn't quite pleased with that. But in terms of, you get the goal in the 85th minute, and it was a lovely finish. And the goal has come about by getting bodies up the field. Two men challenging Gundogan for the first duel. They win that. And then obviously Rodrigo making himself a bit of a nuisance in the duel with Akanji. Again, so Akanji doesn't quite get rid of the ball, and it comes off, I think, Rodrigo's thigh, I believe, and then it's a lovely finish. And the boy's got that in his locker. I think we'd all agree. But it's the 85th minute. And 4 minutes were added on. So you've got pretty much 7 or 8 minutes to make life difficult for Man City. And we discussed Big Sam and his credentials, and he volunteered a lot of those in terms of extolling his own virtues, shall we say, about his managerial pedigree. And what I found remarkably surprising was his inability to just simply get his team to play man for man for the last 8 minutes. Because what are Leeds actually going to lose by losing? You're only going to concede one more if you're going to concede. So you're going to lose 3-1 at worst case scenario. And I saw Man City get the ball, and it was a case of Man City keeping the ball, as they always do. But Leeds made what I would call the absolute basic elementary mistake of simply going back to playing how they'd played for the first 84 minutes, which was keep shape and keep discipline and make sure we've always got two players on Haaland, and let's be careful, a couple of yards off the wingers. And surely at that point, the manager would simply say, right, guys, I'm not sure if Bamford was on the pitch by then, but it's very simple. You say to your two strikers, whoever they are, you go on to the two centre backs. We literally just go man for man everywhere, and we're going to just take some risks because what do we actually have to lose? Goal difference isn't something. The point is 10 times more rewarding, let's say, a potential point than the risk of conceding another goal and going -2 goal difference for the game. What were your thoughts on that? Because I was very surprised because it's a simple tactic. You simply
Yeah, yeah.
just tell everyone 10 yards up the pitch, one man marks Haaland. If he runs riot, so be it. But we just go man for man, and I was quite surprised. It's not that Leeds didn't lay a glove; it's that they didn't quite have the smarts to know how to lay a glove. What do you think?
It's the latter point that you've just made about the smarts. I think it's a team bereft of confidence. It's a team that's battered, bruised. Big Sam has had what, 3 days, 4 days, so he's hardly had time to prepare. I just sort of think it's a team that is devoid of ability, class, confidence, and there was a lifeline. It was. You were absolutely right. It was a lifeline that we didn't expect, especially with that penalty. I mean, when that penalty was awarded, you think it's. I mean, it was game over anyway, but you thought, right, 3-0, that's it. So suddenly, 2-1. You'd expect almost the cavalry to charge forward to throw the kitchen sink at Manchester City, but it just never happened. And in a sense, it's not that performance it was, I suppose, a reflection of the season that we've had. That there was a glimmer of hope, and a team with a bit more confidence, a bit more ability and belief in themselves, perhaps would have done that. And I think that's what it was. It was simply a team that is rudderless at this moment in time, and it didn't surprise me. I mean, that was the truth of it. I expected a little bit more, but in reality, this side I know too well, and it was never going to happen. You're right. It was you expected, but I won't blame any. There's no blame to Sam because he's just not had enough time, so he can't really instill his ideas. These players, uh, if he's shouting from the touchline, I'm not sure how much information he can transmit from the touchline, which is going to be effective considering it's his first game for Leeds United. So I take your point, but it for me, it wasn't a surprise.
Yeah, and I think that the point I would make is the only slight disagreement I would have with you is that the game stops when you score. So you do have the ability to give a quick instruction to your winger to say, "Hey, just go on their fullback." Tell the other winger, go on their fullback, and that means everyone then has to just move up one. It's not too difficult in my opinion. I was just surprised that he didn't see that. It was as though they were like, well, we'll just get another chance. Well, you're not going to get another chance if you simply stand off them. And I was just surprised. It was 8 minutes to try and cause some mayhem, maybe a set piece, a corner, and you're only going to get those if you apply more bodies into the final third or at least win some duels to get you up the pitch. You alluded to it there. That was half the battle or half the trouble, should we say. You've then got obviously West Ham beating Manchester United. Now West Ham were pretty much out of it, but that win at home to Manchester United will have got themselves confirmed in terms of safety. The more brutal ones came on Monday. A really surprising win for Everton and Atalanta in the end, 5-1 away from home to Brighton, a tough place to go this season. And then you've obviously got Nottingham Forest prevailing in an absolute thriller at home to Southampton. Against Southampton, not going without a shout, battling, kicking and screaming, but they look like their race may be run in the Premier League. I would argue it's perhaps those results that have absolutely taken the fight out of you. What were your thoughts on those two results quickly?
Absolutely. I mean, it started okay because Fulham played Leicester, and Leicester. I mean, it was never going to be an easy game, but really Fulham are quite comfortable. So you almost thought that maybe of the games, Brighton versus Everton, Fulham against Leicester, you would have expected Leicester to perhaps have more opportunity to win than Everton. So it started well because from a Leeds perspective, that was an excellent result because it keeps Leicester right in the mix. The Everton result, absolutely. I mean, credit where it's due. Credit's where it's due. I mean, the season is 38 games, but there are certain pivotal games. There are certain games. I mean, you always sort of say about moments. This could be the moment. This could be the pivotal moment that secures Everton in the Premier League again. because it was a fantastic performance. Because we're talking about a Brighton side that is playing exceptional football. It's a Brighton side that very, very rarely many sides at the bottom can lay a glove on. So it was amazing to score 2 goals, 3 goals, 4 goals, 5 goals is absolutely fantastic. I think what does help Everton at the moment certainly is Dominic Calvert-Lewin. I think he's instrumental in the success of, or at least the way that I think Dyche would like to play. So I think he's superb. I think you can question whether he's got the ability to be an England striker, which obviously he has been, but certainly in terms of a Premier League striker of that ilk, I think he's outstanding. I think he's strong. He holds the ball up well. I think he's got good feet. He's superb in the air. So I think he's got so many attributes. He was fantastic. I think most of the Everton players were magnificent. They fought, they played when they had to play. I mean, it's surprising because sometimes, I mean, when I looked at the stats, because it was, you were absolutely right, it was a win at a canter. But I've looked at the stats. Brighton had 23 attempts on goal. Which I was very surprised about, because it sort of, on the surface, it looks as if it's been quite an impressive performance by Brighton, but they were second best from start to finish. So from Everton's point of view, fantastic. Got to give credit where it's due. From a Leeds point of view, a real hammer blow, a real gut punch. So that was bad enough. But then there was another game later on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, look, that Monday may well have defined in the end, put the final nail in Leeds' coffin. I mean, I hope not. I'm more optimistic.
How many nails are in this coffin? It seems to be.
It's pretty nailed shut right now.
Yeah.
No, I mean, you're right. I mean, Nottingham Forest beating Southampton. I mean, that you can understand. I mean,
Yeah.
Southampton bottom of the table. You'd have hoped for a draw, maybe even a Southampton win, and they did fight. But listen, when you're at the bottom, you're there for a reason, and you're conceding goals. And Nottingham Forest probably, on the whole, were worthy of their win in the end. That they obviously scraped by at the end, and a pivotal, crucial 3 points. And I think for those two teams to win, that leaves Leeds and Southampton as the only two teams in the Premier League that haven't won in the last 5 games, and a win is so crucial. And I think going into obviously Saturday's game against Newcastle, Saturday lunchtime, I believe, it's a crucial game. And we're going to finish this episode by discussing obviously the result at St James's Park, Newcastle against Arsenal, which I thought was an unbelievable game of football. But I think Newcastle are under a little bit of pressure, and I think if Leeds can. The way I would put it, and you may not want to hear this, but the way I would put it is that Everton have had their kind of result of the season. 5-1 away at Brighton is not something Dyche would have foreseen. He'd have happily taken a draw before the game.
Yeah.
And I just think if Leeds, Allardyce has had a bit more time to work with them. He's had a full week. I'm not saying he's going to work miracles, but he'd have had time to work on shape in terms of partnerships, how you go about in terms of getting up the pitch, and I think the Ellen Road faithful will be with them right till the very end in this game. I think they'll think, look, listen, Big Sam probably deserves that. We've got a new manager, and we've got the opportunity to try and rectify this. And I've looked at the fixtures of the other teams. We've discussed this offline, but all 3 teams are playing. Let's just say top 6. Well, I say top 6 opposition, but Chelsea home to Forest. Chelsea aren't top 6, but Chelsea should win that. You'd think Chelsea obviously beat Bournemouth, I think, the week before, but you'd have to fancy Chelsea there. You've got obviously Everton home to Manchester City, most likely champions elect. Again, you'd fancy Man City in the form they're in. To beat Everton at Goodison, although Everton will be buoyed by that win at the Amex. And then Liverpool away to Leicester. Leicester showing very little fight, booed by the away fans at Craven Cottage on that Monday. So they're not in any real form. And Leeds got to hope that that's 3 wins for Chelsea, Manchester City and Liverpool respectively. I just think going into Saturday's game, if they can apply a little bit more pressure, I'm one of those few who actually doesn't believe that Liverpool are necessarily going to catch United, but they may well catch Newcastle. And the goal difference is +7 in Newcastle's favour compared to Liverpool. But one flip of a result may well bring that goal difference a lot more tighter, and really could see Newcastle slip out if Liverpool win out and Newcastle drop some points. And they've got some tough games. They, I think, Newcastle finish. I think away to well, I say away. I'll have to double check that. But Chelsea last game of the season, so it's not cut and dried. And I think they would have fancied getting a point at Arsenal. Again, we'll go into that game in more detail. So I just think Leeds will be facing a Newcastle team, famous last words, but they'll be facing a Newcastle team that I think will be slightly on edge. And I think if Leeds can use that home support to their benefit, what's to say they can't have their result of the season? So that's the glass half full attitude, I would say.
Well, I mean, I'm more the other way around, because I think that defeat perhaps just gives them a kick up the backside. It's the perfect game. I think if you're any team in the top four, if you've had a setback, the best team that you want to play is Leeds United, because there's so many holes. So I just want fight. I mean, I think we've got to that stage. Certainly, I think if you look at the forums, I think as fans, where the reality is, I mean, I think last Monday, the bank holiday, was, for me, I mean, I think prior to that, my head kept telling me that Leeds are down. My heart was sort of saying maybe. On Monday, my heart sort of said no, it's down, because our survival was dependent on others, and the other results, unfortunately, it was not just sort of, I mean, draws would have been perhaps not ideal, but certainly I would have been accepted draws. But wins, they're killer blows. You're absolutely right. At the bottom, at this stage of the season, 3 points it's huge. So I'm resigned to the fact. All I want to see is Big Sam put out a side that fights to the last minute. If we lose, we lose, but at least make sure that the fans leave the ground with at least a little bit of pride, saying, yes, these players at least played for the badge. That's all I can ask for.
Yeah, and I think that's perfectly well put, Ayub. And again, I don't think you'll lose ground over this next round of fixtures. That's what I would say. But it's a great.
That's what I thought on Monday.
True, true. Let's see how that works out in terms of the predictions. But yeah, look, I think if there's fight and there's scrapping, and even if they can get a point, it may well be a really important point in the grand scheme of things. They've got obviously West Ham away there afterwards and finishing off at at Ellen Road, home to Spurs. Who knows what Spurs will rock up at Ellen Road, final game of the season. You've just got to hope you're still battling and got a chance going into that last game of the season. But let's switch it up a little bit. We would normally discuss the top four race, which got a little interesting over the weekend. And I think if Badge was on this episode, it would have been good just to get his thoughts on where he stands. And I think we should cover it in the next episode. Again, a lot of talk amongst some Manchester United fans that they may well drop out of the top four. I don't see it, simply because of
Let's hope so.
Simply because of the games remaining, points already on board, but also goal difference. So I think if Liverpool are going to sneak in, and I do think it's only Liverpool really that can get beyond Newcastle and Manchester United. I think it's Newcastle that they'll fancy perhaps chasing down. Liverpool, I should say, have got Leicester away, Aston Villa at home, and then Southampton away, I believe. So they'll be hoping the Villa game is a difficult one for sure, but they'll be hoping to pick 9 points up from 9. United simply have to pick up 9 points from the remaining 12 points available, and I think they can do that. They've got 3 home games available. But let's discuss that in a bit more detail in the coming episode. Want to get your thoughts first. St James's Park, Sunday afternoon, Newcastle against Arsenal. Bearing in mind Manchester City had won the day before home to Leeds. Many felt this was the game that was finally going to kind of end Arsenal's remote title hopes. How did you see the game, Ayub? I imagine you watched it. What were your thoughts on the spectacle, but also then the result and where that leaves Arsenal?
I mean, I think you alluded to it earlier, that it was, I think Newcastle probably never expected to lose the game. I thought they're probably sort of thinking, well, it's at St James's, we're playing well. But I was I was so impressed with Arsenal, so impressed, because it was, they've had a wobble. Obviously, their confidence must have been dented because they were the front runners for such a long time. Obviously, a lot of people saying that they've choked, they've bottled it, and maybe they have, and maybe I suppose this just frees them a little bit, because in a sense, it's sometimes easier to be chasing rather than, I suppose, leading. So maybe, I suppose, it just relaxed them. But this was the Arsenal of about 3 or 4 weeks ago again. So I think they played excellently well. They beat a very, very good Newcastle side. And I was overall, I think I was impressed by the performance, the result, and I think I won't sort of say shut some people down, but certainly I think it probably answers some people's concerns that maybe, I suppose, Arsenal are just sort of rattled, and maybe the season is a little bit too much for them. So I'm very impressed, and I think it was a big result against a very good Newcastle side.
Yeah, it was a brilliant game of football. And started off, the atmosphere was absolutely electric. You could feel that through your screens. And I, I agree with you that Arsenal had a great performance, but it was one of those games where you felt as though if Newcastle had scored the first goal, I'm not necessarily sure that Arsenal would have found a way to overturn it. Not in that house, not in the way the crowd was, and not against that opposition that knows how to defend. In terms of preserving a goal lead, and Arsenal started shakily. Jacob Murphy hitting the post. Arsenal only really got to grips with the game after about 10, 12 minutes. But I think in terms of I think thereafter was in terms of the control that they managed to slowly exert and the opportunities that they created in the first half. You're right, they were, I want to say clinical, but because they missed quite a lot of opportunities, but they did create some real good quality chances that you don't necessarily see Newcastle concede. I mean, the only time I've seen a team kind of create such opportunities was perhaps when Liverpool visited there earlier this season. But yeah, they've been a very strong outfit at home, and I think for Arsenal, they showed certain elements. If anybody who watched those 95 minutes or whatever it was they would have seen a team that was a different team to the one that obviously went there last season. There was a lot made before that game, right? That this was the stadium where their kind of top four hopes ended, and ended in quite ignominious fashion in terms of the fact that they did, to your point about Leeds, they didn't fight, they didn't scrap, they didn't show like they were a kind of team that understood how to go about going to an away ground and handling it. And this was an absolute red hot atmosphere. And they were winning free kicks at the right time, slowing things down at the right time, managed to take the sting out of the game at the right time, rode their luck, some unbelievable saves by Ramsdale as well. And that's why I'm not getting too carried away in the sense that goals change games. And I think Newcastle, if they had some of those opportunities again, they probably would have scored. So I'm not so happy with the chances conceded. But listen, you're playing against the third team in the league. You are going to concede some opportunities, aren't you? So I think from an Arsenal perspective, Odegaard again continuing his kind of recent fine form, and a lovely finish from outside the box. I like the fact he's taking shots, willing to take some shots. He probably scored from the same distance he scored at the Spurs stadium, if you remember. They're kind of scoring from distance as well. Same kind of part of the goal that he targeted. And thereafterwards, opportunities for Martinelli, opportunities for Saka, another huge opportunity for Odegaard just before half time, which really should have put the game away there and then. But Arsenal just stuck in, and they'll always have the opportunity to counter attack and create opportunities. And in the second half, they've obviously got the own goal created by the left-hand side by Martinelli, another member of our team of the season. So a superb win. Again, some saves from Ramsdale kind of as the game kind of petered out. There was a little bit made about obviously Arsenal's gamesmanship, and look, in the end, I'm for rules that kind of help protect the game where teams are not able to do such things. So I want to be fair and objective, but ultimately, in terms of the way the rules are constructed right now, you could clearly see that Arsenal were definitely looking to slow things down, and they kind of use that to their advantage. Nothing that obviously Newcastle aren't too familiar with as well, if you follow some of the statistics. But look, in the end, a great win. And to your point, I think they solidified that they are the second best team in the league. I think that's very much clear in terms of the point differential as well. And I think it's a sign that they have come a long way in terms of the recovery that they made against Chelsea. Because regardless, that's still one of your rivals coming to your patch, and they dismissed them quite handily, at least by half time. Second half was a slightly more, well, even second half, they could have really gone 4-0, 5-0, 6-0, but thereafter was got a little nervy once Chelsea pulled one back. But I think back-to-back wins, Chelsea, Newcastle, another tough game this weekend. home to Brighton, a team that's beaten them a few times at the Emirates in recent times. But in the end, they've solidified their position as the second best team this season for sure. And I'm not saying that should count for something, but I think it at least stands that they are clearly the best of the rest for the time being. But and I think it gives them something to build on in terms of for future seasons. But yeah, a superb performance, an impressive performance in terms of clean sheet, with with one or two key players missing as well. But I still think it's a long shot. I think Man City have to drop points in a couple of games, and I don't quite see that happening. But you've got to be professional till the very end, and that's all you can do. You try and win your games of football, and you see where that leaves you at the end of the day, and you try and amass as many points as possible. Right? That builds good habits, builds confidence. You can take something into next season. So I do expect them to try and be as professional as possible, not to simply just throw the towel in. But yeah, kudos to Arteta, kudos to the team, and I think another big test this Sunday at home to Brighton.
Going to be a cracking weekend. The Everton, just quickly, just to talk about the Everton Man City game. I mean, I suppose common sense tells you that it should be an Man City win, but they've just played a very, very tough game in quite hot conditions. I mean, I'm not sure what the temperature was, but it was quite hot in Madrid. Concentration as well. Apart from physicality, it was a concentration as well. All the big guns played. They've got, it's not tie over, so obviously their focus will be on Wednesday as well. So Everton aren't going to be a pushover. So you never know. I mean, I'm sort of thinking that Everton might get a draw. You might get a win as well. So Arsenal might. I wouldn't quite write off Arsenal just yet for the title race.
Yeah, and I think, look, in the end, Arsenal have got to simply win their games, right? And if they win all their games, the worst they'll finish off is 4 points behind Manchester City. And yes, that doesn't win you anything, but I think there's something to say that you came up just short against an absolute juggernaut of a team that may still win the treble, which obviously hasn't been done in this country since 1999. So, look, we'll see how it works. And to your point, you never know. That's why you play the game, right? And that's why you play the games. Nothing's. You would fancy Manchester City. They are top of the table. Everton are still fighting relegation, so you would still expect Manchester City to win and win handily. But football's a funny game, and you have to still earn the right and win your points on the pitch and not on paper. So we shall see. Just before we finish, Ayub, and again, we'll get Badger's thoughts on the top four race, because I think that's just developing. And I think if there's another twist or two this weekend, that could again kind of set that narrative off for a great finish to the season in terms of who'll finish third and fourth and fifth. Just want to finish off with a prediction, or not necessarily a prediction, but in terms of Leeds Newcastle, how do you see it? Do you see Leeds perhaps nicking a draw against still a very top quality Newcastle team?
I don't. I mean, there are in other games maybe there could be surprises, but there's certainly not a surprise in the Leeds game. I just don't think we've got the quality, and Sam's just not had enough time to implement his ideas. Plus, we've not got some key players that we need. So I don't see nothing. I don't see nothing at all. So I'm a man who's on his knees at this moment in time.
You've been on your knees for quite some time.
He's a very strong knees, though.
Yeah, must have significant grazes. No, but that's it. Let's wrap up there. I'm a little bit more optimistic, simply because I still.
You've obviously not seen Leeds play.
I have, unfortunately. Being friends with yourself has meant that I've also had to bring Leeds into my life, unfortunately. No, look, we'll see how it goes. I just think there's an opportunity there at home. Big Sam's home debut. The team showed something at Man City. They should have been absolutely wiped out. You're right, 6s and 7s, but they fought, they scrapped, they got a goal. I might be kind of clutching at straws, but there's something to build on. I think Big Sam deserves the opportunity to at least go out and prove that he can get a team, even in a short space of time. Or what you want to see: organization, fight, battle. Don't give up on situations. Make runs. Don't be selfish. Be selfless in your positions. Be brave, wanting the ball. Try and get forward. Try and create opportunities. try and
I think
avoid.
you should. I think you should manage Leeds. It sounds perfect. It sounds so easy.
They couldn't afford me, you. That's the problem. So no, brilliant. Well, let's wrap up there. I'm sure we'll get another episode out, kind of to review the weekend's action. But yeah, that's been this episode of Just Onside. Again, lots of twists and turns to come, I feel, and hopefully some exciting episodes to come. Just before we finish, again, just a reminder, if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe, like, share the video, and comment down below. Are Leeds, is it over? Is it over for Leeds?
It was over a long time ago.
But it'd be good to get the viewers' feedback. Are Leeds definitely going to get relegated? Is there still a twist or two to come in the Premier League title race? And again, Champions League, are those ties done? Are Man City going to ease to victory in the second leg, or is it still finely balanced, as myself and Ayub think? So that's been this episode of Just Onside, and until the next time, we shall see you hopefully on the next one. Good night.